I'm Rachel Gottbaum. In the December 28th issue of the New England Journal of Medicine, there are 3 perspective articles about suicide among adolescents. I'm speaking with Cynthia Montgomery. Her son Bjorn took his life in 1999 at the age of 14. Tell me a little bit about your son. What was he like when he was younger and as an adolescent?
He was a very, very, very bright kid. What was interesting about that, though, was that as he was growing up, we didn't understand how bright he was. And the reason was because he was also quite rigid, and one of the doctors early on told us that he would be the type of kid that if you ask him to tell you about Lincoln at Gettysburg, he could tell you everything, much more than you wanted to know about the scene and Lincoln and what happened there and so on and so on. But then if you ask him, and how do you think Lincoln felt giving that address or being there, that he wouldn't have a clue, that he couldn't imagine what somebody might have felt like in a particular situation. He also wasn't very verbal. When he was little, you hear all of this advice about getting all of these open-ended toys, Legos and crayons and things that promote creativity. And he didn't know how to build Legos, and it was sort of a characteristic of his that he didn't play. A big moment for us was that he got a Lego set for Christmas one year that had instructions with it. And he could build the fire truck because it had the instructions on how to build the fire truck. And he could build very elaborate things. But at the same time, he couldn't play in the way that traditional children played. I was thinking back, when did we first sense that something might not quite be right here? And I remembered going to Mom and Tot's classes where they would do these little word plays and sit in a group and sing songs and so on. I realized that, and he would be over in the sort of the kitchen center taking the pots and pans out and putting them back in and so on and so on. Meanwhile, all the moms and tots were over the other part of the room doing something. And it was pretty clear that he wasn't sort of interested in joining in. And I remember even back then, so say at 18 months or so, feeling this was a little bit unusual. And then when he was in Montessori toddler class, so maybe at 2, I remember going for our teacher feedback session, and there was a one-way window and you could see the kids in the room, and we were sitting outside with the teacher. And she had picked up by then, had said something about, oh yeah, I have to, when I'm working with Bjorn, we do something special. She said, compared to other children, he has a much, much better sense of concentration, and he can really work for very, very long times. And then she said, but once that period's over, then I need to have some activity where he can walk around the room or, find some way to occupy him, because he has trouble finding ways himself to occupy himself. And so I remembered that was sort of a marker looking back on it, that we realized all the way back then that there was something about this child that was different.
So when did you notice things were off and then you sought medical help?
When he was in 4th grade. And we went to back to school night, and you walk into the room and there are all these little desks and everybody's being very friendly, and the teacher invited all of the parents to go into the desks and look at the journals that the children were putting together, and they had all left a note for each of their parents, and it was a very nice night. So my husband and I pulled out his journal and we were looking at what he had written. What he had written about was Kurt Cobain's Sewerside, Sewerside, 4th grade. I just showed it to my husband, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and, we knew. And that was really the long start of the quest to find help. And at the time, we started out probably thinking about, so we really need to get therapy. We really need to get help, someone who can help us and talk with him and work this through. And I think naively at the time, we had a lot of faith in therapy. And I think as time went on, we began to realize that this was much more than therapy, that this was something that was a biologically based illness, chemically based illness, that was beyond what therapy could address on its own. And so the quest started by trying to find a therapist, and it was a harrowing experience. We went to Mass General and had to work very, very, very hard to see a very prominent person there. And we went in, and the person did all of the tests and evaluated him and talked with us and so on, and then came back, and he was the one that told us about, do you realize how smart this child is? And that was the good news. And then he was saying that he thought that there were really serious issues here.